Hi, I'm Natalie Grant. I'm 29, a third grade teacher in Chicago, and if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you my sister and I were soulbound, two halves of one childhood. But sometimes people change, and sometimes love gets weaponized. The envelope arrived on a Monday floral print scripted gold lettering. I knew it was from my sister Jessica. Engagement party it read, February 17th, Detroit, 7:00 p.m. There was a handwritten note inside, hope you can make it, but totally understand if it's too far, XOXO Jess. Too far, I read that twice. Jessica knew I worked weekdays, that Detroit was a 9-hour drive, that February was infamous for Midwest storms. Still, I felt a strange urgency in my chest. We hadn't been close in years, not like before, but this could be our moment, a reset, a way back to each other. Jessica and I grew up in a sleepy Michigan town raised by our mom, Cynthia, after our dad moved to Arizona when I was 12 and Jess was 8. He said it was for work. I later understood it was for escape. Mom never recovered. She spiraled into a fog of antidepressants and daytime TV, and someone had to keep things afloat. That someone was me. I made sure Jessica got to school, had clean clothes, did her homework. I packed our lunches and double-checked the locks at night. I became the mother she lost and sometimes the mother I lost, too. We had a saying whispered under covers on stormy nights. It's you and me against the world. She'd say it. I'd promise. Every time. High school came and went. Then I got into the University of Michigan, my dream school. Jessica was 14 and devastated. I almost didn't go, but she pushed me out the door. You can't give up your dream because of me, she said, trying to sound grown up. We promised to call every night, and for a while we did. But life has a way of stretching even the strongest threads. By my junior year, I was student teaching and she had her own crowd. I graduated, got a job in Chicago, and Jessica stayed close to home for college studying communications at Wayne State. We saw each other on holidays, birthdays, family funerals, but the phone calls thinned, and the bond we once wrapped ourselves in like a safety blanket, it frayed. Then about 2 years ago, Jessica met Derek Lancaster, the CFO of a tech startup. Wealthy, slick, 12 years older. He had that magazine smile and 2 shiny shoes. The kind of guy who orders for the woman at a restaurant and thinks he's being charming. Jessica fell hard, fast. She moved into his high-rise 6 weeks after meeting him. Designer bags replaced hiking boots. Brunch with influencers replaced Saturday morning bagels with mom. I met Derek twice. Both times he was polished, polite, a little too perfect. And Jessica, she started morphing into someone I didn't recognize. When she texted me about the engagement party, I called right away. She didn't answer. When I finally got her on the phone 3 days later, she was distracted. I'll call you back after dinner with Derek's parents, she said. She never did. So when that envelope came with the cryptic, I understand if it's too far, I saw it for what it was. A test. A way to see if I still showed up. I decided I would. Even if it meant driving through hell in a snowstorm. Even if Jessica no longer knew the girl who used to braid her hair and chase away her nightmares. I packed a suitcase, reserved a room, and placed a special order for something meaningful, Jessica's favorite cake from our childhood, a strawberry cream dream we once shared every birthday. I'll be there, I whispered as I folded the invitation and tucked it into my purse. And I meant it, but I had no idea how much that promise would cost me. I left Chicago at exactly 3:15 p.m. on Thursday, my car loaded with a suitcase, a dress for the party, a carefully wrapped engagement gift, and that strawberry cream cake Jess loved so much. I'd picked it up from a local bakery that had a branch back home in Detroit. The baker even commented, "This is quite a special cake. Someone important." I smiled. My sister. I'm driving it 9 hours through a snowstorm for her engagement party. He looked alarmed. Be careful out there. They're saying this is the biggest blizzard of the season. I nodded. I'll be okay. But was I? The first hour was easy. The snow came in soft, lazy flakes, pretty even. I blasted our old road trip playlist, Spice Girls, Britney Spears, A Little Alanis. I imagined Jess in the passenger seat singing along and snapping her fingers dramatically at all the wrong lyrics. I missed that version of her, the girl who laughed so easily, who made up silly dances in the kitchen, who used to fall asleep against my shoulder during movies. But somewhere along the road between childhood and adulthood, I'd lost her. I just didn't want to lose her completely. By hour 2, the snow thickened. The roads turned glossy, slippery. My phone rang. Mom. Natalie, where are you? About 2 hours out of Chicago. Why? The news is saying the snow's worsening. It's dangerous out there. I'll be fine, Mom. I've driven in worse. A pause. Then I spoke to Jess this morning. She doesn't think you'll actually come. My grip on the wheel tightened. What do you mean? She said, and I quote, Natalie always flakes when it comes to family. She'll use the snow as an excuse. I didn't answer right away. I just stared out at the gray-white sky swallowing the highway. I'm proving her wrong, I finally said, voice low. I'm coming. An hour later, I pulled into a gas station outside Kalamazoo. The clerk, an older man with a kind face, shook his head when I told him where I was headed. Eastbound I-94 is closing down. State troopers are starting to turn folks around. I hesitated. For a moment, I nearly gave up. But as I paid, a photo fell from my wallet. Jess and me, arms around each other, beaming at her college graduation. I can't turn back, I whispered. I was too close, too determined. I found an alternate route side roads that added an hour to the trip. I texted Jess. Still on the road. Storm's brutal, but I'm coming. See you by 8. No reply. By hour 5, I was running on coffee adrenaline and blind hope. Snow beat against the windshield like angry fists. The defroster wheezed. My GPS flickered in and out. And every time my tires lost traction, my heart stuttered. Still, I pressed on. Every few miles, I passed stranded cars, emergency lights blinking in the dark. I couldn't help but wonder, would Jess do this for me? Had she ever? Just past 10:30 p.m., my gaslight blinked on. Panic surged. I was on a back road in the middle of nowhere, signal-weak gas tank, nearly empty snow, still falling thick and fast. That's when I saw it, a small glowing sign. A lone gas station like a lighthouse in a whiteout sea. Inside, a young man in a flannel shirt greeted me. His name tag read Lucas. Where are you headed in this weather? He asked, raising an eyebrow as I paid. Detroit. My sister's engagement. He nodded slowly. She must mean a lot to you. She used to, I murmured. Lucas handed me a coffee on the house and insisted on checking my tires. Rear one's low. You've got some ice buildup under the wheel well. Let me take care of it. The kindness nearly undid me. I hadn't cried yet, but his warmth cracked the dam. I don't even know if she wants me there, I said, wiping my eyes. He crouched beside my car, scraping ice. Family's messy. I've got 3 brothers. We fight, we disappear on each other. But when it matters, we show up. That's the whole deal. With my tank full, tires safe, and hands warm from coffee, I got back on the road. Just 45 more miles. That cake was still in the back seat, a little squished, but salvageable. The bouquet I'd picked up earlier was now half frozen. But I was close, so close. By midnight, I finally reached Detroit. The roads where ghostly plows hadn't come through yet. I found the modest hotel I'd booked, teeth chattering from adrenaline and cold. As I checked in, the desk clerk looked me over. Long drive, she asked. Longest of my life, I replied, and I hadn't even seen Jessica yet. The party would be over by now, but tomorrow I thought I'll surprise her, with flowers, with cake, with everything she meant to me. I couldn't know then that the surprise waiting for me would change everything. I woke the next morning to pale sunlight streaming through the hotel window, and a deep ache in my bones, part from tension, part from fatigue, part from the emotional weight I'd carried through a storm. 9:31 a.m. No missed calls, no texts. Not even a glad you made it. I'd messaged Jess the night before telling her I'd arrived safely. I had a faint hope I'd wake up to a reply. But nothing. Still, I refused to let that ruin today. I showered, dressed carefully in the blue sweater dress Jess had once said, brought out my eyes and reapplied concealer to cover the dark circles beneath them. Then I drove to the bakery's Detroit location to pick up a fresh version of the cake. The one in my car had survived, but barely. It deserved better. So did she. So did I. Same message the baker asked as she boxed up the cake. Yes. Congratulations, Jessica and Derek. In gold lettering, please. Next, I stopped at a florist. I bought lilies, Jess's favorite. We used to pick them by the lake near our grandparents' cottage. By 11:30, I was ready. Cake, flowers, a small folded card with a handwritten note. I was going to surprise her at the post-party brunch her invitation had briefly mentioned. A gathering for out-of-town guests hosted at the hotel venue where last night's party took place. The hotel receptionist directed me to the Magnolia Room on the 2nd floor. My heart beat louder with every step I took down that carpeted hallway. This was it, the big sister moment, the olive branch, the second chance. I adjusted the ribbon on the cake box and gently tapped the door open, then stopped. Laughter floated through the barely cracked door, light and careless, and then her voice. Jessica? She texted that she's in town, she said, dry amusement in her tone. But honestly, I'll believe it when I see it. A man's voice answered Derek. She missed the entire party. What's the point of even coming now? She probably won't bother, said another voice I didn't recognize. She always bails right. Derek snorted. From what you've told me, she's all talk. No follow-through. I stood frozen. A chill crept up my spine that had nothing to do with the outside temperature. Then Jessica said the words I'll never forget. She probably turned around at the first snowflake. A pause. Then almost laughing part of me hoped she'd crash. Laughter. Laughter. Like it was funny. Like I was a joke, a burden, a punchline. I nearly dropped the cake. I should have walked away, waited until I calmed down. But I didn't. I pushed the door open, the hinges groaning like they didn't want to witness what came next. The room fell silent. Heads turned. Jessica's face paled. Derek's smile froze. 8 people stared at me. Her, him, his parents, friends, people I didn't know. I walked straight to the table, set the cake down gently next to a half-empty mimosa carafe. Then I pulled out the original cake, still boxed, slightly crushed, and placed it beside the new one. I drove through a blizzard for you, I said, voice low but steady. 9 hours. Nearly skidded off the road 3 times. I looked at Jessica. I brought the cake you love. I wore the dress you picked out. I brought your favorite flowers, and I heard everything. I turned, walked out. I didn't look back. Natalie, wait, Jessica's voice followed me into the hallway. I didn't stop. It wasn't what it sounded like. But it was. I pressed the elevator button. Again. It was a joke, she shouted. You weren't supposed to hear it. I stepped inside. The doors closed on her face. And in that moment, I felt a pain deeper than any betrayal I'd ever known. Not because she'd joked about my death, but because in some twisted part of her she meant it. Back in my car, I drove aimlessly. Through downtown streets, past coffee shops we used to sit in, parks we'd played in as kids. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to be far from the Magnolia Room. Eventually, I ended up at a riverside park, the kind with benches buried in snow and swings too frozen to move. I sat in the car engine running heat on full blast. And finally I broke. Tears came in waves, hot, messy, unstoppable. I pounded the steering wheel, screamed into my coat sleeve, let it all out. The drive, the storm, the years of sacrifice, the memory of every time I'd shown up for her, and every time she hadn't shown up for me. And now this. The worst part, I still wanted to understand why. My phone buzzed. Jessica, again. I didn't answer. Then my mom's name appeared. I hesitated, then picked up. She told me you came, Mom said, her voice trembling. What happened? She wished I'd crashed, Mom, I whispered. She said it out loud, in a room full of people. Silence. Then softly, come home. You shouldn't be alone right now. I didn't know where home was anymore, but I knew it wasn't here. I couldn't go back to my hotel. The room now felt tainted, like I'd carried my heartbreak into its walls and poisoned the air. So instead, I found another place, a modest inn 10 miles out of the city, quiet and dimly lit. The woman at the front desk didn't ask why I was checking in early, or why my eyes were bloodshot, or why my hands shook as I handed her my card. Bless her for that. I collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers. But it didn't. Not to the question that echoed in my head, how did we get here? It wasn't just the comment. It was everything that came before it. The slow unraveling of who we used to be, the ways I'd bent and stretched and sacrificed for a bond that apparently meant more to me than to her. I remembered being 15, skipping a class trip to watch Jess perform in a school play despite having a math final the next day. She'd cried afterward, hugging me backstage. You always show up, she'd said. I remembered 21-year-old me holding her hand in the ER after she broke her wrist during a camping trip. She was terrified. I'd made jokes the whole time to distract her. This'll make your signature way cooler, I'd said. And I remembered every birthday, every heartbreak, every quiet moment in between where I'd picked up her pieces while carefully hiding my own cracks. And now this. I ignored her calls. 12 in 1 hour. Her texts ranged from dismissive, you're overreacting, to guilt-laced, it was one comment, I didn't mean it, to strangely controlling, Derek says you're being dramatic, please don't ruin this weekend. That one nearly made me throw my phone. I turned it off. I didn't sleep, not really. I drifted in and out of restless dreams filled with snow and locked doors and voices laughing behind my back. At dawn, I forced myself out of bed and drove to the nearest coffee shop. I sat at a window seat watching the world move on like nothing had happened. That's where my mom found me. She slid into the booth across from me, a knit scarf wrapped tight around her neck and concern etched into every line of her face. How did you find me? She held up her phone. A very kind man named Lucas called me. Said you'd been in rough shape when you passed through his gas station. Of course, the gas station guy, the one person who'd been kind to me in the last 24 hours. I didn't speak. I just stared at the steam curling from my coffee. Mom sighed. Jess told me a version of what happened, but I want to hear it from you. So I told her everything: the storm, the cake, the door, the laughter, the words. Especially the words. I think she meant it, Mom, I said quietly. That's the part I can't shake. Somewhere in her deep down, she really didn't want me to come. She wanted me gone. My mom looked wrecked. And guilty. I've failed both of you, she said, tears forming. After your father left, I leaned so heavily on you, Natalie. You were a child and I treated you like an adult. And Jess, she got away with so much because I felt guilty. I let her become selfish. I wanted to say it wasn't her fault, but it wasn't that simple. Patterns like this don't form overnight. They're built one choice at a time. Back at the inn, I stared at my suitcase. Still unpacked. Still zipped up like a promise I never got to keep. I didn't want to see Jess again. But I knew if I didn't say something now clearly, calmly, I might carry this pain for years. So when she texted one last time, "Please, just talk to me," I replied, "Room 212, you have 10 minutes. She arrived out of breath like she'd run through the hotel. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red. "Natalie," she started. I held up a hand. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "And I'm not here to comfort you either." She sat down stiffly on the edge of the bed like it might bite her. "What you said yesterday," I began, then shook my head. "No, it wasn't just that." I looked her in the eye. "You don't see me anymore. You haven't for a long time." Jess opened her mouth to protest. "You used to eye cut in. You used to know what I meant to you, what I gave up for you. But now, I'm just the dramatic sister who always flakes, right?" "No," she whispered. "That's not true." I raised an eyebrow. She looked away. "I was venting," she said. "Derek's parents were there. I felt judged. I got caught up trying to seem different." I stared. "You wished I'd crashed my car, Jess." "It was a joke." "Was it?" She blinked. I didn't think you'd actually come. And that right there is the problem." We sat in silence, the air between us thick with the weight of years. "I sacrificed so much for you," I said, voice breaking for the first time. "Stanford, relationships, vacations, time, so much time." She looked stunned. "You turned down Stanford." I nodded. "Because Mom was falling apart, and you were 14. You needed someone. So I stayed close." "I didn't know." "I never told you," I said. "Because that's what love is, Jess. Doing the hard thing without keeping score. But love can't survive being ignored, or disrespected, or used." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "I don't know who I am without you." "That's something you're going to have to figure out," I said softly, "without me carrying the weight for both of us." Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. "Derek." She silenced it. For once. "I'm going back to Chicago tonight," I said, standing. "And I'm turning my phone off for a while." "Wait, what does this mean?" "It means I need space. Real space. Not a timeout. Not a guilt trip. Space to rebuild myself without you as the center of every decision I make. And if I need you, I'll be here," I said, "but not at the expense of myself." She began to cry. I wanted to hold her, but I didn't. Because this time, I needed to hold myself. I left Detroit as the sun dipped behind the snowbanks, casting long gold shadows across the interstate. The roads were clearer now than when I'd arrived, but inside me the storm still churned. Every mile that pulled me farther from Jess felt both like relief and grief, like tearing off a bandage and exposing raw skin to the wind. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove, letting silence replace the usual playlists, letting my thoughts spool out like ribbon behind me. I needed space, not just from Jess. From the identity I'd spent my life clinging to, the fixer, the dependable one, the one who always showed up. Because somewhere along the way I'd stopped asking who I was when no one needed fixing. I made it as far as a rural gas station outside Ann Arbor before my hands started trembling too badly to keep going. I pulled in, parked by the pump, and just sat. The sky was inky black, speckled with stars. Inside the car it felt like I'd stopped existing, just a shell, still functioning but hollow. That's when a knock tapped softly against my window. I jumped, startled. It was Lucas, the guy from the Detroit gas station. He looked surprised too. "Hey, you okay?" I rolled the window down a few inches. "You again?" He smiled. "You look like you need coffee, and maybe a place to sit." Inside, the small station's lights were warm and fluorescent, humming gently. The air smelled like burnt popcorn and cinnamon gum. Lucas poured me a cup of fresh coffee and handed it over without saying a word. After a few sips, my hand stopped shaking. "Didn't expect to see you again," I said finally. "Yeah, well, this isn't exactly a tourist hotspot." I smiled faintly. He leaned against the counter. "You don't have to tell me what happened. But you can if you want to." And just like that, it spilled out. Everything. The overheard conversation, the confrontation, the heartbreak. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer cliches or sympathy too sweet to swallow. He just listened. Sounds like you've been carrying her weight for a long time, he said when I finished. And she forgot you weren't built for it. I looked down. I don't know who I am without her, without that responsibility. Lucas tilted his head. Maybe it's time to find out. Simple words, but they hit me like thunder. Can I show you something, he asked after a pause. I blinked. What? He walked to the small door behind the counter and gestured for me to follow. Out back was a picnic table, half buried in snow, and beyond that, an open field untouched and glowing silver under the moonlight. Lucas stepped into it knee-deep. I hesitated, then followed. You know, he said, breath-misting snow erases everything. You can't tell where the path was yesterday, or what was underneath. It gives you the chance to start fresh. I stared at the field, blank, silent, infinite. I never thought of it like that. We stood there in the stillness, the world muffled by white. I don't think I've ever let someone take care of me, I admitted. Maybe it's your turn, he said. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild. From nothing. From snow. From truth. Before I left, Lucas handed me a folded piece of paper. Phone number, he said. If you ever want someone to check your tire pressure or your heart. I laughed an unexpected, unguarded sound. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. Back in my car, driving through the quiet of midnight roads, I didn't feel like a sister or a teacher or a fixer. I just felt like Natalie. No labels, no roles. Just myself. And for now, that was enough. I arrived back in Chicago just after 2 a.m., the city skyline shimmering in the distance, like a memory I'd almost forgotten to return to. My apartment welcomed me with silence, familiar walls, familiar warmth, and yet, nothing felt the same. I dropped my overnight bag in the hallway, set the cake now slightly sunken on the counter, and collapsed onto the couch, still wearing the dress from Detroit. The weight of the last 48 hours pressed into my bones. Not just the physical toll of the drive, but the emotional one, the reckoning, the clarity. For years I thought love meant sacrifice, that if I just gave more, showed up more, loved harder, I could preserve what we had. But love without reciprocity isn't love. It's self-erasure. The next morning I called in a personal day. My substitute teacher had already taken over Friday. I needed Monday too, not for recovery. For rebuilding. Step 1, therapy. I'd thought about it for years, danced around it, made excuses. But after Detroit, there was no more pretending I didn't need help untying the knots inside me. I made an appointment, 2 p.m. Thursday, first available. Step 2, setting boundaries. I didn't know if Jess would listen, but I knew I had to speak clearly. Not in defense, not in anger, in truth. So I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and wrote, Jess, I need time and space to process what happened. What I heard at your brunch hurt deeply, not just because of the words, but because they reflected how you've come to see me. I've spent most of my life trying to be everything for you. Your protector, your cheerleader, your backup plan. And I don't regret loving you, but I do regret losing myself in the process. I'm not shutting you out. I'm just choosing to prioritize my own healing for the first time in a very long time. If we're going to have a relationship in the future, it needs to be based on mutual respect, not obligation, not guilt. And Jess Derek's behavior worries me. The way he talks to you. The way you seem to mold yourself to fit his world. I hope you see what I saw. But I know you have to come to that truth on your own. I love you. That hasn't changed. But I'm learning to love myself too. Natalie? I reread it 4 times. Then hit send. Her reply didn't come immediately. But when it did, it was exactly what I expected and feared. You're being dramatic. Again, you always make yourself the victim. Derek says this is just your pattern, run away and blame everyone else. But if you want to walk away from your only sister, go ahead. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because it shocked me, because it didn't. And that told me everything. That night I turned my phone off, not to punish her, not to be cold, but to reclaim my peace. Instead I poured a glass of wine, lit a candle, put on a soft playlist, and pulled out an old journal I hadn't opened in years. At the top of a fresh page I wrote, "Who am I when I'm not needed?" Then I started listing a teacher who lights up when a kid finally gets it, a woman who cries during nature documentaries, a friend who makes killer cinnamon rolls, someone who once wanted to write children's books, a woman who loves starry skies and bonfires and acoustic guitar covers. The list kept going. I'd forgotten so many of these pieces. buried them beneath the weight of being the strong one. But that night, I started to remember. By the time I drifted off to sleep, I didn't feel healed. But I did feel wholer, and that was enough, for now. 3 days passed. No more texts from Jessica. No apology, no reflection, just silence. And for the first time in years, I didn't rush in to fill it. I let the quiet sit. I let it breathe. I didn't reach out to ask if she was okay. I didn't send follow-up messages to clarify my tone. I didn't ask her to explain herself better. I let her sit with the weight of her words, because that's what accountability requires. And I sat with my own pain without trying to minimize it. It hurt. But it didn't destroy me. Thursday afternoon, I walked into my first therapy session, with my heart thudding like I was stepping onto a battlefield. The therapist, Dr. Keene, greeted me with a soft smile and a gentle voice. "So, Natalie," she said, her pen resting lightly against her notepad. "Tell me why you're here." I laughed a dry, brittle sound, because I just drove through a snowstorm to attend my sister's engagement party, only to overhear her say she hoped I'd crash on the way there. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't flinch. "That's quite a sentence," she said. "And how did that make you feel?" I opened my mouth to respond. Nothing came. Then I laughed again, but this time the laugh cracked. And I cried. We spent the hour unraveling years. Of patterns. Of pain. Of quiet sacrifice disguised as strength. "She's always needed me," I said. "I've always been the one who fixes things." "And who fixes you?" Dr. Keene asked gently. I didn't have an answer. When the session ended, I felt drained but lighter, like I'd pulled something from under my ribcage and finally set it down. I scheduled another appointment. And then I walked to a nearby bookstore, something I hadn't done in months. I browsed without agenda, letting my fingers trail along covers, letting my mind wander. In the children's section, I found a book with an illustration that stopped me cold: two sisters under an umbrella in a storm, one shielding the other. The title, "The One Who Stayed." It was supposed to be a children's book, but it felt like a message. That night my phone buzzed again. I stared at the screen, heart steady, not racing. Jessica. But not another attack. This time it was just 4 words. "I think you're right." Followed by another message. "I don't know who I am without him." Then, and maybe that's the problem, I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I closed my eyes, leaned back against the couch, and let the weight of those messages settle. Not as victory, not as closure, but as possibility. Maybe she was starting to see it. The same way I had to. That some relationships, romantic or familial, require us to disappear in order to keep them alive. And that staying visible, staying whole, might mean letting go of who we were taught to be. Later that evening, I replied, "When you're ready to figure out who you are, not for him, not for me, but for you, I'll be here. But I won't carry you. You'll have to walk this part on your own." She didn't respond right away. But for once, I was okay with that. Because growth is slow, and healing doesn't scream. Sometimes it starts in silence. March came in with gray skies and melting snow. The chaos of the blizzard faded into memory, but the internal storm still echoed quietly. Some days I felt strong. Other days I felt like a glass figurine, solid on the outside, hollow on the inside. But every day I moved forward. School gave me something to anchor to. The classroom was loud, colorful, messy, everything my life hadn't been in weeks. My students didn't care that I'd just survived emotional warfare. They cared about whether our class guinea pig had actually eaten the sunflower seed they left by the cage. They reminded me how healing it could be to stay present, to teach, to serve but not disappear. One afternoon, one of my quieter students, Maya, left a note on my desk. In clumsy handwriting, it read, "You make people feel safe." I stared at it for a long time. And for the first time in weeks, I cried not from pain, but from recognition. Maybe I was someone who made people feel safe. But now I was also learning to make myself feel safe too. Jess continued texting every few days. Nothing dramatic, just quiet honesty. I told Derek I needed space. He didn't take it well. "I think I've been pretending for a long time, not just with him, with everyone. I found an old box of letters you wrote me in high school. I forgot how much you loved me back then. I'm sorry I stopped seeing it." I still didn't rush to reply. I read each message slowly, thoughtfully, and when I answered I was careful, clear, boundaried. I wouldn't let myself slip back into the role of the fixer, but I would stay present if she kept doing the work. And she did. 3 weeks after the brunch, I got a text that said, "I broke up with him," followed by, "I cried for 3 hours. Then I bought myself flowers. Thought you'd be proud." I was, not because she ended it, but because she chose herself. Maybe for the first time in her life. On a rainy Sunday in late March, I got another message. "I'm seeing a therapist now. Her name's Diane. I'm terrified, but I didn't cancel the second appointment. That felt bigger than any apology. It meant she was choosing change. Not for me. Not to win me back, but for her own survival. Meanwhile, I kept working through my own healing. Therapy, journaling, saying yes to things that had nothing to do with being useful to others. I even started revisiting an old dream writing children's books. I hadn't let myself believe I was allowed to create something for me, not just for my students. But now, I was writing again. Then one evening, as I walked out of my apartment building into the still cold Chicago air, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in a few weeks. Lucas. Hey, I'm driving through Chicago next weekend. Any chance you want to grab coffee? And not cry this time? I smiled, truly smiled for the first time in a long while. Only if you promise not to check my tire pressure mid-conversation. Deal, though I make no promises about coffee quality critiques. I laughed out loud. Maybe this wasn't the end of my story with Jess. And maybe it was the beginning of a new chapter for me. One where love wasn't sacrifice. Where showing up for others didn't mean erasing myself. Where quiet strength, not loud devotion, was enough. It was mid-April when my mom called and said I'm thinking of having a small family dinner. Just you, me, and Jessica. I froze. Not because I hadn't imagined it happening, but because imagining it and being ready for it were two different things. I took a breath. What kind of dinner? Just the three of us, she said softly. No big reunion, no pressure, just food and space. There was a long pause. Jess wants to see you, but only if you're open to it. I didn't answer right away. I stared at my living room window, watching spring try to thaw the city. Okay, I said finally. But we take it slow. No rehashing, just presence. Agreed. I arrived at my mother's house with a pie I'd bought not baked. A small symbolic rebellion. I didn't need to perform to be welcomed anymore. Jessica's car was already in the driveway. The sight of it gave me pause. For a moment, I was back in Detroit, car full of cake, and Hope Heart full of old memories I didn't realize had expired. I shook it off. This was different. I was different. Inside, Jess was sitting at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. No makeup, hair pulled back, jeans, soft sweater. She looked like herself. A version I hadn't seen in years. Hi, I said, voice even. Hi, she replied, standing awkwardly. We hugged, but it wasn't emotional. It was cautious, earnest. A beginning. Dinner was simple. Roasted chicken, green beans, rice pilaf. We talked about Mom's garden, about Maya, my student, and how she'd written her first storybook. About the weather, about nothing. But sometimes nothing is how you start everything. Halfway through dessert, Jess asked, Do you remember that road trip to Traverse City when I was 10? I nodded. You threw up in the rental car. I was so scared you'd hate me for it. But you cleaned it up, then bought me gummy worms and made up that song about the barf monster. We both laughed. It was the first genuine moment we'd shared since before Derek, before the storm, before everything cracked open. After dinner, we sat on the porch swing, wine glasses in hand, wrapped in old throw blankets. Jess spoke first. I don't expect everything to go back, but I hope it can go forward. I didn't say anything right away. Then you hurt me. I know. I don't trust you the same way anymore. I know that too. But I see you trying. I am trying, Nat, for real this time. We talked until the sky faded into night. About therapy? About how hard it was to unlearn being the girl who always needed someone else to tell her who she was. About how many parts of herself she'd silenced just to be loved. And then she asked the one thing I didn't expect. Do you think you'll ever write that book? I blinked. What book? The one you used to talk about. The one with the two sisters. You said you wanted to write something for the kids who didn't feel seen. My throat tightened. I don't know, I admitted, maybe. You should, she said. It'd be good. You've always seen people, even when they didn't deserve it. The words struck deep. Maybe I didn't need to erase that part of me to heal. Maybe I just needed to stop giving it all away without boundaries. When I drove home that night, the city lights seemed softer. Not because things were perfect, but because they were real. Because we were learning. Because a sisterhood built on truth, even if scarred, was stronger than one built on illusion. And because I'd finally chosen to write my own next chapter. The following week, I sat at my desk on a quiet Sunday morning, staring at a blank document titled Sisters in the Snow. I hadn't intended to write it, not really. But after that night on the porch swing, something inside me shifted. For the first time, I wasn't writing to be productive. I wasn't writing for my students. I wasn't writing for validation. I was writing to process, to remember, to rebuild. The story flowed slowly at first. 2 sisters. 1 storm. A journey of silent snow and the things left unsaid. I wrote the memories as fiction, but they carried the truth of everything we'd been through, the caretaking, the resentment, the heartbreak, the healing. It was cathartic, beautiful, terrifying. And it was mine. I sent the first draft to no one, not even Jess. Not yet, but I did email it to my therapist. And later to my friend Elena, who'd always encouraged me to pursue writing. "This feels like your voice," she replied. Unfiltered, brave, human. That meant more than any writing award ever could. Meanwhile, Jess kept showing up, not with grand gestures, but with consistency. She called when she said she would. She asked about my classroom and listened to the answers. She talked about therapy not as a fix-all, but as a place she was finally learning to sit with herself instead of trying to shapeshift into what others needed. "I used to think being loved meant being liked all the time," she said once on a walk around the lake. "But I think love means being honest, even when it's messy." I nodded, especially when it's messy. One afternoon in May, I got a surprise package at work. Inside was a box of strawberry champagne cupcakes from a bakery in Detroit. No note, just a small card with 4 words in her handwriting. "This time I see you." And slowly something even more surprising happened. I started seeing her too, not just as the role she'd played in my pain, but as the girl she once was, and the woman she was trying to become. Not perfect, not all better, but present. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of trusting that again. Not blindly, but carefully, with boundaries, with hope. That weekend I had coffee with Lucas. He was in town again for work, and we met at a quiet cafe tucked between bookstores and flower shops. He smiled when he saw me. "You look different, lighter." "I feel it," I said honestly. We talked for 2 hours about work, about siblings, about small towns, about the absurdity of online dating. There were no grand declarations, no pressure, just comfort, just possibility. Before we parted, he handed me a small notebook. I figured writers need tools. I opened it to the first page. He'd written, "Blank pages don't mean emptiness, they mean freedom." That night I sat on my balcony notebook in hand city lights flickering like distant stars. I no longer felt like the girl who had to earn her place in people's hearts through sacrifice. I didn't feel like a supporting character in someone else's story. I felt like a woman who had stood in the middle of a blizzard inside and out and kept walking, who now got to choose what came next. And for once, the future felt like an open window. Summer arrived quietly with the kind of warmth that made you forget how brutal winter had been. Life didn't return to normal because I'd stopped chasing that. Instead, it settled into something more real, more grounded, more mine. Jess and I started meeting every other Sunday. No forced emotional downloads, no rehashing the past every time we sat down. Just walks, conversations, a few shared laughs over iced coffee and street musicians. One afternoon she turned to me and said, "Do you ever think about who we could have been if we'd both had what we needed growing up?" I paused, all the time. She smiled softly. "But maybe, we're becoming that now." She wasn't wrong. It wasn't about getting back to the past anymore. It was about rewriting the present and finally doing it together. Not as the savior and the saved. Not as the perfect and the broken. But as 2 flawed healing women choosing each other again. This time with intention. This time with truth. At school, I finished the year with a sense of peace I hadn't known before. My students surprised me with a hand-drawn card that read, "Thank you for showing us that strong can be soft and soft can be strong." I didn't cry in front of them. But I kept that card in my desk drawer, and every now and then when the world felt too loud, I'd read it again. Because that's who I wanted to be. Someone who didn't vanish to protect others. Someone who didn't stay silent just to keep the peace. Someone who could be strong and soft without apology. In late July, Jess invited me to help her clear out her storage unit. The same one she'd rented when she moved in with Derek. Half of it was filled with things he'd made her put away. The hiking boots, the handmade art, the flannel shirts, the dream journals. "I boxed up parts of myself to make room for his version of me," she said, holding a dusty scrapbook. "You don't have to keep it anymore," I offered gently. She looked around, took a deep breath, and nodded. We made 2 piles, keep and let go. And with every item she released, I saw her reclaim something invisible but vital. Later that day, we sat in her apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. She handed me a framed photo, us as kids, tangled in a blanket fort, messy hair, and gap-toothed grins. "I almost forgot who we used to be," she whispered. I looked at her. "I think we're finding out who we're meant to be." She exhaled slow and deep. "Thank you for not walking away." "I did walk away," I said honestly, "but I left the door open." She nodded and I walked back through it. Healing hadn't made us perfect, but it had made us honest. And that honesty was a better foundation than any picture-perfect sisterhood we once pretended to have. By the time August rolled in, I was preparing for a new school year and a new chapter entirely. One evening, I stood in front of my closet packing for a long weekend in Boston. It wasn't just a vacation. It was an interview, a new teaching opportunity with a progressive charter school, one that combined writing, storytelling, and curriculum development. It had been a long shot, but they'd called me back. "You'll be amazing," Jess had said, helping me pick an outfit. "And if you go, I'll be proud, and I'll visit, and we'll make it work." The old Jess would have made me feel guilty for leaving. This Jess? She hugged me at the airport and whispered, "Go become everything you put off for everyone else." And I did. 6 months after that snowstorm changed everything. I stood in my mother's backyard under the soft glow of string lights, watching fireflies blink against the summer night. It was warm, peaceful, sticky with nostalgia, and surprisingly healing. We were having a quiet gathering, grilled corn, potato salad, lemonade in mason jars, just family. And Jess. She arrived just as the sun dipped behind the trees. No designer heels, no Instagram-worthy outfit, just sneakers, cut-off jeans, and a ponytail. The version of her I hadn't seen in almost a decade, the real version. She smiled when she saw me. "Got something for you?" she said, lifting a white box tied with a pink ribbon. I knew immediately. "Strawberry champagne?" She nodded. "I figured we could start over, or at least have cake while we keep figuring things out." We didn't eat the cake right away. We sat under the porch awning, forks in hand, laughing and telling stories from childhood, how we once tried to build a tent with laundry poles and broke Mom's flower pots, how we swapped identities for an entire afternoon in 3rd grade and no one noticed. We laughed hard, the kind of laugh that feels like cleaning out a wound with joy. Later, as Mom went inside to clean up Jess and I stayed out on the porch swing. "I keep thinking about that blizzard," she said, "and how easily it could have ended differently." "I know," I said. "I think about that too." She turned to face me. "I'm sorry I made you carry everything for so long." I met her eyes. "Sorry I didn't let go sooner." We didn't need dramatic forgiveness. We'd already given it to each other in actions and patience in the spaces between what was said and what was lived. Our bond wasn't shiny anymore. It wasn't photo perfect. But it was honest. And to me that meant everything. In the months that followed, we continued to evolve, not as people who clung to the past, but as women growing toward the future. Jess started volunteering with a local women's shelter, helping clients write resumes and rediscover confidence. "I spent so long trying to impress people who didn't care about who I was," she told me once. "Now I want to help people remember who they are." And me, I took the job in Boston. I packed my things, said goodbye to my students with tearful hugs and handmade cards, and began a new life in a city where no one knew my story. It wasn't easy. I missed home sometimes. But in the quiet of my new apartment, I wrote every night, finishing my book about 2 sisters finding their way back to each other through snow silence and forgiveness. The manuscript's final line: "Some journeys don't take you where you planned to go, but exactly where you needed to be." I dedicated it to 2 people, to the sister who taught me how to let go and still love, and to the girl I used to be. Thank you for surviving so I could finally live. 1 year after the storm, I returned to Chicago for Jess's birthday. She'd chosen to celebrate with a simple dinner, backyard string lights, mason jars, and a single candle on a homemade cake. Strawberry champagne, of course. We didn't make a big deal out of it. We just cut 2 slices. And this time we ate it together. No apologies, no roles, no baggage. Just sisters, choosing each other, choosing themselves, and choosing to begin again.